And welcome to the Scrutiny Hour special with your host Lisa Hanley. We have a very special interview with the Honourable Mark Brantley, Premier of Nevis.
Graham Brantley. Greeting. By virtue of the powers vested in me by Section 102(2) of the Constitution of St. Christopher and Nevis, I do hereby appoint you the said Mark Anthony Graham Brantley to be the Premier of the island of Nevis with effect from the 19th day of December 2017.
Nevis is a very small island in the Caribbean. It consists of two islands, St. Kitts and Nevis. It happens to be where my family are from as well. Today's discussion is about how he got into politics. We discuss COVID-19 and the effect on Nevis. And we also discuss the Guardian reports of Nevis being a tax haven for the wealthy. Is that true or is it not true? We're going to find out more now with Mark.
Thank you for coming on today. I'm so happy to be able to speak with you. Just to get some clarity, would you be able to state your name and your occupation for me, please?
Okay, so my name is Mark Brantley, and I am currently the Premier of Nevis. I've been the Premier of Nevis since the 18th of December 2017. I'm also the Minister of Foreign Affairs for St. Kitts and Nevis, a post that I've held since February of 2015.
And so you are the fourth Premier of Nevis.
Yes.
Amazing.
The first premier was our national hero, Sir Simeon Daniel. Our second premier was Mr. Vance Amory. Our third premier was Mr. Joseph Parry. Mr. Amory came back and replaced Mr. Parry, and I have taken over from Mr. Amory.
Amazing. And what are the responsibilities for a Premier of Nevis?
Maybe it's easier telling you what the responsibilities are not.
Okay.
Our responsibilities are huge. The Premier of Nevis is charged basically running the island. I am required to manage the finances of the island, manage the healthcare sector, the education sector, infrastructure, electricity generation, water, all the services, garbage collection, you name it, falls to the Premier of Nevis and what is referred to as the Nevis Island Administration. We also have the Nevis Island Assembly, which is a local parliament where we make laws in certain prescribed areas exclusively for the island of Nevis. So I head that as well. So I have a full plate. There's a tremendous amount of work to be done. Indeed, under our constitution, the only areas for which St. Kitts, Bastille, the federal level is responsible would be foreign affairs, international representation, and of course, defense. So the police and security, that falls to the national government, but the local government pretty much takes care of everything else.
And what is the difference between responsibilities between you and the Prime Minister?
So the Prime Minister has primary responsibility for everything that happens on St. Kitts. And he then has some national responsibilities for St. Kitts and Nevis, like foreign affairs, diplomatic representation, like security, both national defense and internal security. So the local police force, the local armed force, all of them would come under his direct control. He also has responsibility for setting overall policy for the country. So in terms of educational policy, health policy, Nevis can make laws, but we can make laws only that accord with what the federal policy is. It's a very interesting construct. In fact, it's unique in all of the world, but really comes from our peculiar history. St. Kitts and Nevis and Anguilla were all joined together by the British for their own administrative purposes. The people in Nevis never liked the fact that they were being governed from Bastille, and the people in Anguilla didn't like it so much that they took up arms and revolted. In 1967, they broke away and returned to Britain as a colony of Britain, which they remain to this day. And Nevis is only 2 miles away. And so these two islands, St. Kitts and Nevis, continued until we became independent on the 19th of September, 1983. I think that the Nevis Island government, the Premier, the Nevis Island administration, all of those were safeguards that were built into the Constitution as a consequence of the very difficult past that the two islands have had together. And so since then, we've been trying our very best to work together. It's not always easy, but I think this new government which has been in place since 2015, has really been what I call the last best chance for St. Kitts and Nevis, because it really brings together disparate elements, two parties in St. Kitts, a party in Nevis, and together we have come together under an umbrella of Team Unity to form the government.
Mm. It's interesting because Team Unity is yourself, the Prime Minister, and the third person is
Sean Richards. Team Unity is really three political parties. The Prime Minister, Dr. Harris, he leads the minority party, PLP, but he is in the chair as Prime Minister. I lead the CCM, the Concerned Citizens Movement. That party has 3 seats in the parliament. The Prime Minister's party has 2. And then the dominant party, the large party, is the People's Action Movement, headed by Sean Richards, and that holds 4 seats. So in a parliament that constitutes 11 seats total across the country, we currently have 9.
So you told me about the difference between roles and between you and the Prime Minister. So what does a typical day for you look like as the Premier of Nevis? Like, what is your typical day like? And give me a day in the life of Mark Brantley.
Okay, so it varies from day to day, because some days I work out of my office on St. Kitts. I maintain an office on St. Kitts. Clearly, I have federal responsibilities as the minister with responsibility for foreign affairs. I'm in charge with the overall diplomacy for the country. So I have a full team on St. Kitts, and then I have an office in Nevis, of course, as Premier, and the various portfolios that I hold in Nevis. Today, I am speaking to you from Nevis. Normally, I go to St. Kitts Mondays and Fridays. I also go over for Parliament. I go over for Cabinet, naturally. I go over for whatever is required. On Nevis, I'm here Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and of course weekends, because I work 7 days a week, essentially. And what is a typical day? A typical day can be almost anything. It can start with interviews by Lisa Hanley. It can start with, various meetings. Yesterday, for example, I spent quite a bit of time on a forum called GlobeSec out of Slovakia. I was a panelist on a forum there. I went from there to an interview at Pravda, and then I had some meetings outside of the office. And so yesterday was a day spent in meetings. Today is going to be similar, because I think I have a schedule here which takes me up until about 1 o'clock today, with a series of meetings sort of slotted in half-hour slots. Thursdays tend to be my what I call open day. I think in the UK you refer to it as surgery. I'm not sure why you use that word, but surgery for us connotes something where somebody's cutting away at you. But in any event, I come into office on Thursdays, and I have what you would call a surgery, where people come in. I don't make appointments normally on Thursdays. People just walk in, and once they walk in, I see them. And on an average Thursday, I can see 20 or 30 people, various constituents who come for a variety of reasons. Since COVID, what we've done is try to structure it a bit more. So now we're giving people time slots so that they don't come and stack up, if you will, on each other. So a typical day could be almost anything. And of course, on a small island, things happen. There's an accident up the road and somebody gets injured, I'm going to be called. There is a storm that comes and does some damage, I'm going to be called. I also have a very large constituency. In fact, my constituency is the second largest, in the Federation. So of the 11 constituencies, I have the second largest. So there's a number of things that happen and that, keeps me active and keeps me engaged. I'm also married with 2 daughters. And so that also is an aspect. So I'm constantly having to juggle all of these various roles. I'm blessed, however, with excellent staff, and they do a lot of great work. And so take some of that pressure off of me.
Yeah, I can imagine on such a small island as well, you get quite a lot of people approaching you. Are you accessible?
I try to be very accessible. In fact, sometimes I'm accused of being too accessible because, I'm in the supermarket. I'm everywhere. I go everywhere. I'm very accessible on social media. I have a 2-hour radio program now. It's been going for 14 years on the most popular radio station here for 2 hours every Wednesday from 8 to 10. That is a fixture now in the life and times of St. Kitts and Nevis, and I do that religiously. I think I'm very accessible, but on a small island, it's difficult not to be. Although I suppose some people try not to be. It's really tough because if people can't get you on the phone, they show up at your house. They come and they ring the bell because everybody knows where you live. and so people come and look for you. So it's sometimes a little unsettling that on a Sunday morning I'm trying to say get an extra hour's rest, and the doorbell starts going because somebody's there demanding whatever issue they have. They want a resolution. So that happens sometimes. But I think generally, it's island life, and island life is a great life. With all its challenges, I wouldn't trade Nevis for the world. It's where I want to be. It's a beautiful place. There's nowhere that I could be where I look out the window and the fresh air, the calmness, just the breathtaking beauty that we have, our beautiful mountains, our beautiful beaches. I just think that the Caribbean generally, and Nevis in particular, is a very, very special place.
Mm. It is. I haven't been there for a very long time, since I was 6 years old. So it's been on my bucket list to go back.
You only look about 16 now, so imagine it's only about 10 years. So but you need to come home soon. Your family talks about you, and we're really, really proud of the great work that you're doing. But you definitely need to come and see us.
I do. I really want to go back, especially now, because I feel like with everything shutting down, it's the best time to come. I can imagine it's so much more calmer there now without all the activity.
And we've done. I mean, we've really been blessed. We've had an excellent technical team advising us on this COVID pandemic. We have listened. We recognized there was no manual or blueprint for this, and so a lot of it was being made up as we go. But we have been blessed to have very, very good people, and with the grace of God, we have done really well here. Nevis, for example, has only had 6 cases. The entire island has only had 6 cases of COVID, 5 of whom have completely recovered. The 6th one, we're told, is on her way to recovery. There have been no hospitalizations, no deaths. The entire Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis has only had 19 cases, no hospitalizations, no deaths, and all but one, have fully recovered at this point. In fact, Nevis went for a period of 5.5 months without a single COVID case. And we only ended up getting 2 new cases because, of course, our borders are slowly reopening. And so our nationals traveled abroad were coming back, and sadly, they brought it back with them. But our detection system is excellent. Our isolation quarantine is excellent. And I would normally be wearing my mask, but since we're virtual, I don't need to wear it. So, I think that generally we've done really well, and I'm very proud of the response that we've had. We've stepped up in terms of our expenditure in health. We have acquired PPEs, we've acquired masks. Nevis has taken the unprecedented step of distributing reusable masks to every single household on the island. That nobody else in the region has done that. They literally went around house to house, door to door, and handed out masks that are reusable. We've also provided disposable masks to our churches. We've provided disposable masks to our schools because our school children are required to wear masks. So we've provided a stock at each school so that in the event that a student or teacher were to forget their mask at home, then they don't need to be turned back because their masks are available at school as well. So we've done a tremendous amount with very limited resources, and I'm quite proud of our response. We've made things like hand sanitizer available to all of our churches. We clearly are making them available to all of our schools as well. So the response, I think, it's been an all of society approach that we've taken, and the private sector has stepped up. And I'll tell you, Lisa, it was a phenomenal thing here to see during the lockdown, because we went through a very hard period of curfew and a hard lockdown. To see our frontline workers out, our police officers, our nurses, our people who are in disaster preparedness, and they were out there, but also to see the response from the private sector. People were delivering pizzas, people were delivering meals to them, people were cooking for them. I mean, it was really something to behold, to see the island so united and so together in this fight. And I think that more than anything has helped us weather the storm. We're now looking at another storm on the horizon because the borders are going to reopen on October 31st to international travel. So British Airways can come, and American Airlines can come, and that's when we anticipate that we will be tested again, because understandably we expect that some people coming from hotspots, they may want to holiday with us, but certainly they may also bring the virus with them. But I'm grateful that we have made some fundamental changes to our infrastructure. We have beefed up in terms of training. On Nevis, we've trained over 1,500 people in terms of frontline persons. We've also trained trainers, where we've provided training to individuals who go back to their respective institutions and provide training. Overall, federally, We will train over 5,000 frontline people. These are taxi operators, bartenders, restaurant workers, people who are the front desk and frontline in the hotels. All of these have been subjected to training. So I think that all in all, our response has really been commendable for a small island. And thankfully, we have not had some of the bad headlines that we've seen elsewhere. We've seen even in the UK where you've had some serious problems. We've seen in Italy and Spain. We haven't had that, and we're grateful to God for that.
Yeah, we've had some really bad problems here, and I definitely want to get onto COVID. But I still want us to come to you for a bit. You've got a very amazing educational background in law. So you've got a bachelor's in law from the University of West Indies. You've received a legal education from Norman Manley Law School, and you studied civil law here in the UK at St. Catherine's College, which is part of the University of Oxford. So what made you go from law to politics?
Maybe a bout of insanity. I think, I don't know. I grew up very poor, as many of us in Nevis did. It's not even a badge of honor because we're all in the same position. I tease my children now, who are clearly much better off than I was, and I say to them that all of us were poor, we just didn't know it. It's only now looking back you realize that things were really, really tough. But I grew up really poor. I got some opportunities in terms of education. I had teachers at an early stage who invested in me. My mother, who was not the beneficiary of formal education, she's now passed, but she was very committed to her children getting an education. My dad, similarly, he also did not benefit from formal education, but he too was committed. And so they saw the value of it, even if they had not themselves had it. And so I got that chance. I went to school. I did well in school. I was first in class and, little bright boy, as they used to call me. And then went through and was able to win scholarships along the way to ease that financial burden. I won a scholarship to study law, which I did at the University of the West Indies. That scholarship extended to the Norman Manley Law School. I did really well at Norman Manley. I was first in class, which was first for the entire region, the entire Caribbean region. And then I was accepted at Oxford and went there and spent some time there doing the BCL. I came back home because I always wanted to be in Nevis. It's my home. This is a place that I love. I had job offers in London. I had job offers in New York. I had job offers in a place like the BVI, but I wanted to be home. And so I came home and started to build something. I built, I think, a pretty successful law practice here. But there is a point when there is, in my view, no more, I'm not sure how this is going to sound, but there's no more personal joy in making money. How much money does anyone need? I had a home, I had a car, my children were taken care of. My wife was happy, that's always important. And so the issue was really, what do I do next? Do I just keep on doing these matters and representing people? I had a very good practice in terms of commercial law practice, which took me to far-flung places like Hong Kong and Singapore. So we did well. We argued cases in every court of appeal, and most of the courts in the region and the Caribbean. I'm a member of the bar in several of the Caribbean countries. But at the end of the day, I thought that there had to be some sort of higher purpose, if you will. And I was very committed to education and very committed to the idea of scholarships, because I recognize how expensive university education can be. And I recognize that a lot of our people who were similarly placed like I was could not afford it. And I have seen a lot of families here go into a serious debt to try and fund an education for their children. And I had all of these ideas about how we could do better, how we could probably reach out to governments and wealthier countries and get scholarship opportunities. But regrettably, I found that I didn't have a voice. And so I was a radio show host. I was talking until I was hoarse. But I felt, instead of constantly trying to encourage people in government to do something in terms of policy, why not go in government and do it yourself? And sort of that is how I sort of segued into that. And I'll tell you, since I've been in government and I share personal experience, I think one of the greatest joys that I have had. Some people look at roads, they look at buildings, they look at things that they would have built. And yeah, I've done a lot of that. But I think one of the greatest joys I had, one day I was driving through Charlestown, which is the capital here in Nevis. and I saw this young woman, and she was immaculate. It was as if she had stepped off the cover of Vogue. She was beautifully dressed in beautiful suit, heels, a nice handbag, and she was walking down the street. And I actually, she caught my attention, and I looked a second time. So she was actually a young woman from a very poor family, somebody that I had really gone to bat for to get a scholarship. And she had gone off to study in Taiwan, of all places, and had come back, speaks Mandarin, came back with her degree, now has a very good job, and was walking in town, and I just happened to see her. And I thought to myself, this is what leadership and politics should be about, building people, trying to get people into a position where they're better off, a position that they would perhaps not been had you not advocated on their behalf. And so I look at people like that, and I'm very proud of that type of accomplishment. That's what gives me satisfaction, because when you can touch lives in a very positive way, I think that's what politics ought to be about. The downside, of course, is that when I entered, I was a young person. My hair was black, and now, I'm gray everywhere. So that's the pressure of the politics and the political process. But it is what it is, and I think my own perspective that I'm here to make a contribution, and when the time comes, I will move aside and allow others to come through and make their own contribution. So persons like yourself who are in the diaspora, we think are very important to that contribution as well. And so that's why I was so happy when you reached out to me to give me an opportunity to speak to you and clearly those who might be viewing, and to say how important it is for that connection to remain. Now with technology, we really have no excuse. We ought to be connected. We ought to be speaking more to get the ideas and the energy from persons such as yourself or in the diaspora to see how we can leverage all of our human capital for the development of our island and our people.
Yeah, and politics obviously wasn't the end goal for you, but you've ended up here and you've done such a good job. But the biggest news I can't imagine any politician was ready for was COVID-19.
Yes.
And the detrimental effects of this pandemic. And you were right in saying that St. Kitts and Nevis has only had 19 cases, and which is great news compared to places like the US and the UK, where I'm from, where it's just been out of control. And you've had no deaths there at all. And according to statistics in 2011, Nevis has a population as an island of over 11,000, and you've only got one hospital. So was there a plan in place to manage the prospect of possibly going over the amount of infections that you anticipated?
Yeah, we did a number of things. For example, we developed a few off-site facilities. We have an isolation facility that we developed that is off-site the hospital. That facility, I think, can accommodate about 12 persons. We also created an off-site quarantine facility, where we can accommodate, I think, up to 27 or 28 rooms, individual standalone en-suite rooms that we were able to rent. It was actually a dormitory type development that we were able to go in and rent the entire complex to have that. So yeah, we only have a limited number of hospital beds, but we developed off-site in the event that we needed to use them. The quarantine sites we have used because as persons have come in and needed to quarantine for 40 days, we have accommodated them in the quarantine site. The isolation site also has been used because clearly, as I said, we've had 6 positive cases, 5 of whom have long recovered and who's left to recover. So we've sort of tried our best to anticipate the possibility that we may have an outbreak, and so we have tried to make some provisions otherwise. Of course, we have the hospital, we have these 2 off-site facilities that all of which have been utilized, but thankfully, as I said, nobody has really been sick, and therefore nobody has required hospitalization. In addition, we've invested in things like new ambulances, we've invested in ventilators, we have really ramped up in terms of our PPE, our response and our training. All of those things have been put in place. Next piece of the puzzle that we're trying to solve now on Nevis is the testing.
As a first step, please visit www.covid19.gov.kn and complete the entry form. You will also have to submit a negative PCR test from an accredited laboratory completed within 72 hours of travel, undergo a health screening on arrival at the airport, and download the SKN COVID-19 contact tracing mobile app.
One of the downsides, of course, to this COVID is that the entire world was demanding things like ventilators and testing equipment. And so small countries such as ours, we got locked out. So even if we had money to buy, we couldn't buy because the bigger countries were essentially commandeering all the supplies that were available. I think that has eased now, so we're trying to do that aspect of it.
Okay. And St. Kitts and Nevis relies heavily on tourism. So how did the lockdown and shutting down of the borders affect the island economically?
It has been devastating. Just bear in mind, in Nevis, over 60% of our revenue comes from tourism.
Wow.
And we have been closed since the 25th of March. In fact, normally we make the most money in tourism in the Caribbean between November of one year and May of the other year. That's what is called the high season. When it's cold for you, we do better in the Caribbean. Naturally, when it's summertime in London, you're not as inclined to fly off to the Caribbean because you have beautiful weather. It's wintertime that you want to get away. So the reality for us has been that we have been locked down since the 25th of March. And so for the past 6 months now, October is going to be 7 months, there's been zero tourism activity, none. Everything is closed. So that now means that all the hotel workers have been furloughed. We have all the taxi operators, all the tour operators, many of the restaurants, the restaurant workers. So we're literally talking in a small community such as ours, thousands of people who have been out of work. So it's really been devastating for us, and that is why we are so anxious to have the border reopen on the 31st of October and hope that we can salvage some semblance of business for the rest of the year.
What are the other big money-making industries other than tourism that you've lost, that have been hit by COVID in Nevis specifically?
Well, I think everything hit by COVID. That's the reality. And we have also quite a robust financial services sector. We have quite a bit of trust work and international business companies that are formed here, international banking that occurs here. But because most of the world was on lockdown, reality is that business also slowed tremendously. Even business that depended just on virtual contact or on online communications, all of that slowed. Your coffee shops weren't open. People weren't going to Starbucks or wherever. People weren't going to the malls. Everything was shuttered. This is really something that we have never seen. The closest example that we had is perhaps the influenza outbreak in World War I, 1914, 1918, that kind of time frame. So we really don't have in living memory any experience such as this. Who thought a city like London, a city like New York would be brought to a standstill because of COVID? And so every sector here has been affected. I will tell you, though, that I think the benefit, if we could use that word, of this whole period has really been to make us resilient. I have seen, for example, an amazing renaissance in agriculture because we were concerned that we had to do better at feeding ourselves so that we are no longer as dependent on imported food. And our young people in particular have responded. They're using technology such as greenhouse and shade house technology. The produce is amazing. It's organic, it's local. And we're seeing that sort of surge in people now being far more independent, far more willing to go out and start small businesses. We made $5 million available for small business startups where we focus on women because we want to see more women doing business. And we focus on the youth, people under 35. And that has really taken off. People are responding in a very positive way. And we understand that mom and pop shops all across the world are really the backbone of most economies. And so we want to stimulate and grow that sector as well. So I think that I've seen as the real resilience of the Nivisian people as we combat this invisible enemy of COVID-19.
As you said that the borders are set to open at the end of the month, there is still a lot of countries that are still facing a lot of travel restrictions. So where are you expecting the tourists to come from? It's because it might not be from the US or the UK because there is a lot of travel restrictions there now. So where are we expecting the tourists?
Well, we expect people to come as they do from all around the world, really. We think that there's a level of pent-up demand. St. Kitts and Nevis, in particular Nevis, we cater to the higher end of the market. We are a very sort of high-end exclusive jurisdiction. And our view is that people who have disposable income, and many haven't had anything to spend on in the last 6 months because not even shopping you could do really, that they are prepared to come out on holiday. And so we are really marketing aggressively to those individuals and inviting them to come and see us. And many countries are now offering what are referred to as longer stays. We're encouraging people to come out and work. And so, Lisa, you can come home and work for 6 months virtually. So this is, again, something that has grown in popularity with people saying, hey, these islands are safe. We have no deaths. We have very, very low infection rates from COVID. It's perhaps safer for me to be in this than it is for me to be in London or in New York. And as a result, people are saying, well, hey, can I come and get a beautiful villa and stay for 6 months, stay for a year? And if my work allows me to work remotely, then I can do that. And so we are seeing some of that interest as well. So the hope will be that we continue in that vein. And I hope that, the traffic will pick up as people see that you're open and see what the new normal looks like.
Now, another big part of political news this year was the fact that Barbados removed the Queen as the head of state.
The time has come to fully leave our colonial past behind. Barbadians want a Barbadian head of state. This is the ultimate statement of confidence in who we are and what we are capable of achieving.
By November next year, Barbados will have followed Trinidad and Tobago, Dominica and Guyana in no longer recognising the Queen as head of state.
And I know that the Queen is currently still the head of state in Nevis. So what does that mean to St. Kitts and Nevis, and what does that mean for the Prime Minister or yourselves day-to-day administration? Does she have any political or economic power in St. Kitts and Nevis?
No, and I think that it is part of the reality that the Queen as head of state is really a figurehead arrangement. Her Majesty really has no power whatsoever in relation to St. Kitts and Nevis. She's represented locally by a Governor General, but again, someone who really has formal role, but no real power. The real power in our Constitution resides with the Prime Minister, with the Parliament, with the Cabinet. And so it really, Barbados, I think, and what they have said, it's an exercise that some have gone through. Dominica has done so. Trinidad and Tobago has done so. Guyana has done so. But at the end of the day, it's really an exercise of, as some put it, just removing any vestige of the colonial past. But in terms of a real effect or real impact, I don't think that there's much really there to see.
Okay. And are St. Kitts and Nevis thinking about doing the same?
That issue hasn't come up here. It really hasn't. It hasn't been topical. I think in St. Kitts and Nevis, we've been focused on, engaging with the economy, engaging with our people, building the economy, building our people, strengthening our healthcare sector, strengthening our education sector, making opportunities available for young people. Those for us are far more important in terms of priorities than who sits as head of state, a purely ceremonial position. So we have not really paid any attention, either publicly or privately, to issues such as those. When the time comes for constitutional reform, certainly that will be one of the issues that we look at. But I can't say at this point that that's high on our agenda at all.
Okay. It seems to be quite a big thing about gaining independence in the Caribbean. Do you think that there'll ever be a time where St. Kitts and Nevis won't ever be St. Kitts and Nevis, and it'll just be St. Kitts is one side and Nevis is another? Will Nevis ever be an independent entity?
Well, there is the prospect of it because the Constitution actually provides a mechanism for that to happen. But we understand that the world is hostile to small countries. That's the reality. And we also understand that St. Kitts and Nevis currently is the smallest country in the world. certainly in the hemisphere, smallest country in the hemisphere. If we were to separate further, we understand that you would have now two micro-states existing. But I think a lot depends on the relationship. And that is why I said that team unity represents the last best chance, because if we can't do it, I don't see that anybody else will be able to. If we can't do it with the political configuration that we have at this time, I don't know that anybody else will be able to. So that is the reason why I, for one, am working so hard to make this relationship work, and to say to colleagues on St. Kitts that they too must work hard to make it work, because the alternative is that the people of Nevis will say adios and go their way. And clearly, I think that is fraught with its own concerns and difficulties. So this is our last chance, our last dance here. We're trying our best to keep this union together, and to keep the government together, and to keep the country together. The alternative, as I said, is to have two separate micro-states. And I think the world has shown it has no sympathy for small countries. And so we have to consider that if that were to happen, then we would have the same challenges. We would have the same risks and responsibilities as any other country anywhere else in the world.
So you're saying that if Nevis was to go independent, it would make it vulnerable to kind of bigger countries to take advantage of?
Well, we are all vulnerable now. The small islands are vulnerable. We're vulnerable to climate change. We're vulnerable to policy decisions taken in big countries. When the European Union, for example, decides in Brussels that they're going to put us on a list of uncooperative jurisdictions, a so-called blacklist, that has tremendous reputational risk for us. It is fraught with danger for our financial sector, our banking sector. We have banks and big institutions making decisions that they will no longer have correspondent banking relationships with the region. All of these have tremendous impact, negative impact. And so the truth is that, yeah, we're vulnerable, and we will be more vulnerable because of our size. In a world today where wealth and military might are very important in shaping global opinion. You look at an issue such as climate change. The United States can one morning decide, I'm going to pull out of the Paris Agreement. That's it. I'm out, because they have the power to do that. They can decide that rules that apply to other people won't apply to us, because they have the power to do that. We, on the other hand, do not have that power. So small island states, just like small animals in the jungle, you have to be more nimble. You have to be probably a bit smarter. You have to respond more quickly. And so we will continue to do that. But the truth is that we are vulnerable. We are among the most vulnerable of people in the region and the Caribbean. We have had, difficulties, a past that included slavery, a past that included colonialism. And we are now, many of us, quite young countries. St. Kitts and Nevis only attained its independence in 1983. And so we're only 37 years old. That's quite young. Even for an individual, that's quite young. And so for a country, we understand that we are still very much in a building phase. We're trying to build out our infrastructure and develop people.
Yeah. And you say that the Caribbean is on the blacklist?
Not all of the Caribbean countries. There's some Caribbean countries. In fact, I saw something yesterday where the EU is threatening Barbados, I think Trinidad and Tobago, and one other country I can't recall now, that they will put them on some blacklist again. And so it's an example of powerful countries and powerful blocks using that power, not to help, not to seek to assist us in developing, but really to attack. It's ironic, because as the EU goes after a small, vulnerable jurisdiction such as ours, we have billions of dollars being laundered through London and through banks in Europe. We have Danske Bank, for example, is a good example. In the heart of the European Union, Danske Bank laundered billions, with billions of dollars. Yet you haven't heard that any of those countries that Danske operated in was blacklisted. So you always hear about Caribbean and these offshore havens in the Caribbean, and they make us out as if we're bandits in the region. The reality is that the real bandits are residing elsewhere, are operating with impunity in the corridors of power and commercial influence in Europe, but they don't seem to attract the same ire of the European Union as the Caribbean and small vulnerable countries do. And I believe, again, that's an example of might being right and major countries and major blocs using their power not to help, but to disadvantage small vulnerable countries such as ours.
Mm. And it's good that you mentioned the Caribbean being classed as a tax haven, because I know St. Kitts and Nevis has been classed as a tax haven. And there was an actual article in The Guardian in 2018 that says Nevis laws allow rich people to put ramparts around their property to protect it from someone who might want to use the courts to take it away, whether that be a business partner, a spouse, an estranged child, or indeed anyone. And all tax havens do this, but Nevis turned the raptured many cliques further than its rivals in its efforts to tempt business away from its rivals. What would you say to that?
I don't know if it would be appropriate language to use on a program, a highbrow program such as this, but I think you have an English expression called bollocks. Yeah, that's an expression I would use. You know, the Guardian is, I suppose, like many newspapers, they try to sell papers, and so they write the most sensational things. I've seen an article, might even be the same article, when they said that Nevis was the most secretive place on earth. And I thought to myself, we're more secretive than North Korea. We're more secretive than Myanmar and countries such as those. It's just incredible. These journalists, I suppose, who have more time on their hands, have had a latte too many at Starbucks and decide, let's go after some topic that we think is going to sell papers. I think when examined, a lot of that is just nonsense. It's really nonsense.
It's interesting because it says that 70,000 in 2017, information on 70,000 Navision companies was leaked as part of the Paradise Papers investigation. And that was all about tax havens and companies that were hiding their money. And you were quoted in there, and please tell me if this quote is not right or not, but you said that we feel very strongly that people are entitled to some semblance of financial privacy. Is that what you said to them? And
yeah, but let's face it. You're Lisa Hanley. You go out each day. You work hard. You fortunate. You invest. You do well. You have your family. You have your country home in Oxford. Your flat in London. Why should your neighbor know how much money you have? Why is that relevant to your neighbor? Why should your financial business be public, so that the criminal down the street knows what you have and can then come after you and your family? There is some value to privacy. That is why people have confidential information. Now, there seems to be a view in some quarters that because Lisa Hanley's business affairs are private, then she's involved in something illicit. And I reject that. I don't want people poking through my private affairs. I don't want a reporter. And incidentally, that reporter, if it's the same person I'm thinking of, came to Nevis and apparently got very annoyed that he couldn't walk into a bank or walk into a trust company and say, could you give me information on Lisa Hanley? They said, no, you can't do that. The only way you can get information on entities such as that is through a court order. And the same applies in London. Our laws here are in large measure fashioned from laws that we inherited from the United Kingdom. And the countries, territories of the UK, such as the BVI, the Cayman Islands, for example, Jersey, Guernsey, the Channel Islands, they all have various iterations of the same thing that we do. And people understand that there's value in privacy. The question is that whether privacy is naturally associated with criminality. I think that the answer to that is no. If people are paying their taxes, they're doing what is right. Now, if you pay all your taxes, you make £1 million this year in London, and you pay all of your taxes to the Exchequer, and you decide, you know what, I have £100,000 left, and I'm going to put this in an account in Nevis, where I'm from, my family is from. And, when we go out to holiday, we have funds there that we can use to holiday. Why should your neighbor be able to get that information? Why should a guardian be able to get that information? Once you and the Exchequer are comfortable with each other, I think that's where it ends. But you have some people who seem to feel that there should be an open system, that they just need to Google your name and all of your financials and your bank accounts and your your assets pop up. And I'm saying that's really none of their business. And that seems to be part of the narrative that privacy necessarily means criminality. And I reject that. I think that each of us is entitled to our privacy. And some people want privacy for a variety of reasons, including personal security.
Yeah, I think that their point is that they feel that not just there's a bank account with the money in it in Nevis, but they feel that there is companies being registered in Nevis, but then the money is held somewhere else for people that own property in the UK, in the US, and so on and so forth. So it's the same thing that's happened in Jersey and in Guernsey and stuff like that. And they're saying that the UK jurisdiction can't interrupt what happens in Nevis. So that's why wealthy people choose to have companies registered there.
Yeah, but I think while they're saying that, and it's selling papers in London, miraculously they're ignoring something like Danske Bank, which is laundering billions of dollars. They're ignoring all the Russian oligarchs who have come and bought up expensive flats in expensive areas of London. I've said publicly before, I don't think that the wealthy, the billionaires of the world are coming to London for the weather. London's a beautiful city, but it's certainly not for the weather. They're coming there because London creates an environment which is attractive to them. I don't see any articles about that. So in a way, the Caribbean, because again, we're weak and we're vulnerable in terms of our countries, we provide an easy target. And so they come at us. Why don't they do the exposés on the big banks? Why don't they do the exposés now on these leaked reports for these suspicious activity reports? It is making headline news now because it shows the vast sums, billions and billions of dollars that are coming through, Main Street banks, high street banks in London, Wall Street banks in New York, that they have been involved. You look at a scandal in Malaysia, what's it called, 1MB scandal, I think, this sovereign wealth fund that they had there, and realize who were involved. Some of the biggest global names in finance, some of the biggest names involved in financial services. They are not in Little Nevis. They're not in the BVI. These are big boys. These are in Wall Street. These are in London, High Street. I've never heard anybody say, let's blacklist New York. Let's blacklist London. So we see that hypocrisy. And that is why I reject wholeheartedly a lot of these crazy assertions that are made. This notion that we're all down here sitting down in suitcases and suitcases of cash, it's really nonsensical. And I think that has to be rejected. And we who know how the world works have a duty, I think, to correct that narrative.
So do you have any 5-year plan for Nevis? Like any 5-year plan changes for Nevis, where you want the island to go?
I think where we want the island to go is in terms of clearly we need more development. We need more economic development in particular. We are very, very robust about climate adaptation. So one of the things we're pushing is geothermal energy here on the island, which can revolutionize and transform our island, because if we're successful in this geothermal thrust, it would mean that our island now becomes 100% fossil fuel free for the generation of electricity. That would really put us in a league of our own insofar as the global environment is concerned. So we're pushing on that. We're pushing on financial services to say that there is still a place for financial services in the world that is not centered in money centers in Switzerland, in Zurich, in London, and in New York, that there is still scope for other players, smaller players like us. We're looking at things now like cryptocurrency to determine whether or not the digital asset craze that we're seeing, whether there is longevity to that, and whether or not we can engage successfully there. So there are a number of things we're looking at, but for me, on the ground, immediately, it's all about food security. It's about getting our people back. Nevis has very arable land, very fertile land, but we have abandoned farming many years. Most people prefer to go work at the banks. We're now saying to our people, there's an opportunity here for us to grow more, produce more. We grow organic food, food that is healthy, and we feel that there's an opportunity there. So on various fronts, we continue, of course, to look for additional investment in terms of our tourism sector, our hotel sector, our private villa sector. That has been growing nicely, and we're hopeful that that will continue to grow. But then again, we're a small island, and one of the taglines for Nevis is Nevis naturally. And we really do not want to get to a stage where we overbuild or overdevelop. We do not want to lose that thing, that je ne sais quoi, that makes Nevis so very special. And so for us, it's also important to strike the right balance between development and our environment to ensure that Nevis naturally tagline, that we live up to that which has really made us unique and special in the entire Caribbean. I like to say that Nevis is how the Caribbean used to be. Nevis is how the Caribbean used to be. It takes us to a bygone age, an era where people depended on relationships. Nevis is where you come to find yourself after the success and the hurly-burly of success in London and New York. You come here to unwind, to detox, and to rejuvenate. And we think that, connecting in that way, in a very almost spiritual way, is what we offer. And so we want to preserve that. And so that's why in Nevis, you don't find any fast food chains. We don't allow it. You don't find any traffic lights. In my town, odd, but we don't have any traffic lights because we really want to remind people of how the Caribbean used to be.
Wow. So there's no McDonald's, you won't find any KFCs or anything like that there?
Lisa, when you come, I will have to cook you chicken. If you wanted chicken, I'll have to do it personally because we sadly have no McNuggets. We have no KFC. We don't have any of that. It's available in St. Kitts if you want to take the ferry to go over there, but we don't allow it in this.
I think that's amazing. Is there going to be a green Nevis? Are you looking into sustainability and recycling and things like that?
Yes, in fact, that's why we are making this huge effort in thermal energy, because they said that will ensure that we no longer need diesel plants to provide electricity. We are now considering a ban on plastics, single-use plastics and styrofoam, working with the federal government in St. Kitts on that. It will be a national ban across the Federation. So a number of things that we're looking at. Recycling is certainly high on our agenda as well to see how we can get that started. And so, oftentimes when people on an island, they say, oh, I'm on this idyllic island, but you forget that wherever people are, they generate waste, they generate garbage. And so how do you manage that on a small island? All of those are critical issues, but I can tell you that they're front and center in my government's policy, and we're looking to see what prescriptions that we can come up with to solve some of those issues and to ensure that we continue to strike the right balance between environment and development.
And thank you so much for this interview.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm sorry that the technology wasn't as cooperative as we would like, but hopefully you heard some of what I said, and I look forward to engaging with you on another occasion, and certainly look forward to you coming home. So I promise I'll cook you fried chicken, okay?
Oh, thank you so much.
All right, take care.
All right, take care, Mark.
Okay.
Bye.
All right, bye-bye. Ciao.
Okay.
St. Kitts and Nevis, take 7.
Thank you all for listening to the Scrutiny Hour special with your... Oh, gosh.
Podcast.
I keep talking about it as a podcast. It's not a podcast. It's a video.
Die. Wrap it up. St. Kitts and Nevis, take 8.
Okay. Thank you all for watching the Scrutiny Hour special with your host Lisa Hanley and with
St. Kitts and Nevis, take 8.
Okay. Thank you all for watching the Scrutiny Hour special with your host Lisa Hanley and with the Honourable Mark Brantley. Thank you so much for being able to sit down with me and have a discussion about all the things that we talked about, and thank you for everyone for watching. Please do subscribe to my channel hosted by Lisa, and please follow all of my socials, which should be here. And I will be back very soon with even more interviews and content.